For regular videos on ancient cultures and forgotten civilizations, please subscribe.
Speaking of tube drills, or core drills, they're yet another example of machining marks that are not explainable by the tools or techniques in the archaeological record.
As Ben is well aware, experiments have been done to recreate these holes with ancient tools. In 1983, Leonard Gorlick and John Gwinnett set out to resolve the question of whether Sir Flinders Petrie was correct that a copper blade with an abrasive could not possibly make the markings we see in the tube drill holes. I will leave a link to their report below with photos so you can get all the details, but it was shown that a copper tube saw with an abrasive made the same marks as we see in the tube drill holes. Petrie was wrong. Ben dismisses this experiment in another video, saying that Gorlick and Gwinnett never say in their report whether the concentric lines form a spiral pattern, and therefore their lines must not have formed a spiral. But of course, that is an argument from silence. I'm no physicist, but it seems to me that any abrasive moved by a rotating drill, even one with a flat bottom, is going to make some kind of descending pattern as they move downward into the stone. No? And even if these experiments did not form true spiral patterns, neither do the vast majority of drill holes in Egyptian stone. As far as I'm aware, and Ben can correct me if I'm wrong, there's only one tube drill core, Core 7 as it's called, that has been assessed for this purpose and possibly has a spiral on it, but that is disputed. One drill core. What about all the other cores and holes? I mean, you can eyeball them and say, well, it looks kind of like a spiral to me, but without any studies done on them to make the measurements, it's not something that can support a theory. If they do not have spiral grooves, then you have to acknowledge that this process with a copper tube saw and abrasive could have made them, right? You can use Core 7 as Exhibit A if you like, but where are Exhibits B, C, and D to corroborate? Even if you put all your faith in the one tube drill core, you still certainly can't make the claim that the matter has been settled beyond dispute.
Yet again, here we have evidence for advanced tools that seem to have cut through tough material like granite at a rate far greater than we could achieve even in modern times.
When Ben says, a far greater rate than we could achieve in modern times, he's going by the calculations of Christopher Dunn, who apparently measured the distance between the grooves on that one tube drill core, that some people think has a spiral pattern, in order to ascertain the feed rate of the drill. The fact that several people have examined this core in detail and come to different conclusions shows, at the very least, that the spiral is not obvious. If it is extremely difficult to make out a clear path of the spiral on these holes and cores, and the spaces between the lines are inconsistent, anyone that claims they were able to measure feed rate to within 1/1000th of an inch is not being honest about their limitations. I have another question for Ben. How do you explain the images in Egyptian art of Egyptian stone workers using drills to drill stone, whether stone blocks or stone vessels? If you believe that the Egyptians did cut holes, then where are these holes in the archaeological record? I expect that you might say, only the holes from the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom or something like that. He really wants to set the Old Kingdom apart. But what if holes were found from, say, the New Kingdom, and they had what appears to be a spiral pattern on them? What would you say then? On the Scientists Against Myths channel, they demonstrated how one person can drill a hole in granite with a copper tube drill as in Egyptian art. They cut 50 millimeters deep in 8 hours. If you look at the grooves made in the core, you can see they are just as deep as in the Egyptian examples.
And why is it shaped like that? Because the drill bit is wobbling during drilling. And at the top it is wobbling heavier, because at the bottom it is thrusting against the material. Wobbling means traveling like that? Yes, it is traveling and thus grinding more granite at the top. That's why the bore is V-shaped in the cross-section. And this is our counter-argument to the frequent statement that ancient Egyptians could not make things like that. It is argued that if one tries to drill granite with a copper tube, it will go blunt very soon. But here we see quite the opposite. Can you show this? Yes, the tube does not go blunt, but becomes sharper. In other words, our drill bit is self-sharpening. Yes, it is a self-sharpening drill bit. I'm not sure if it is visible here, but the wall thickness has decreased.
I recommend to anyone interested in the process to watch the whole video.
And if you'd like some clarification of that claim, please do watch the documentary about it on my channel. There's a link below.
I went and watched his documentary, 90 minutes long, and, somewhat disappointingly, the whole thing was pretty much all about Core 7, and none of the other holes or cores. Let me ask you, the audience, if you knew that an Egyptian stone drilling industry existed, and that many of the holes and cores that have been found do not contradict this idea, but found one tube drill core that looks like it has a spiral groove on it, would that be sufficient evidence to posit that an entirely different unknown civilization made it? Or would the principle of parsimony come into play? It's a good rule of thumb, actually. Would the principle of parsimony move you to conclude simply that this was probably made by the Egyptians, but perhaps in a way you don't fully understand? Or maybe that you're reading a little too much into it. Wouldn't you agree that in order for you to posit an entirely new civilization, there would need to be a preponderance of evidence?
At the other end of the scale, some of these tube drill diameters seem almost impossibly large, certainly way too large to even consider doing it by hand. Something like this incredible coffer that's housed in the Egyptian Museum with 4 just massive tube drill holes drilled into it. These tube drills have also been used to make some very complex objects, like this one, which is a hole, a tube drill hole, that's been drilled into a core from a larger tube drill, which is also housed in a museum.
I honestly don't see how this couldn't have been done by hand.
This block that's being shown by Yusuf Ayawan was, at least last time we saw it, located at Giza. It's another example of a hole drilled into a larger piece that may actually be something from another tube drill. But sadly, this block is now missing. It's no longer at Giza, at least we couldn't find it. And this is an all too common occurrence for evidence that doesn't really fit the mainstream narrative.
Ooh. Notice how Ben, when unable to find an artifact personally, immediately jumps to the conclusion that there is an academic conspiracy trying to hide it, despite the fact that he just showed items on display in museums that show evidence of the tube drill's work, labeled as such. If someone wanted to hide evidence of a phenomenon, they wouldn't hide a small portion of it and leave most of the evidence out and around for everybody to see. And scholars wouldn't be openly writing about it either. It reminds me of the Facebook post that says, "Facebook doesn't want you to see this. Click on it now before they ban it." As for Core 7, although there are many tubular drill holes found in stone in Egypt, he gave us as evidence of a rotating spiral drill, one drill core. He says we should believe Christopher Dunn that the core has a spiral on it, and not believe others who have examined it and said there is no spiral on it. One disputed object is the best evidence he can give, even though there are dozens, if not hundreds, of cores and holes that could be examined. He asks us to accept what he says on faith in one man's testimony. Compare that with Dennis Stocks, another engineer. But unlike Dunn, his experiments have been quite thorough. He has made a study of many tube drill holes and cores to get a full picture. He's conducted numerous experiments to see how the markings may have been made, and he did it until he got a match. That's the way to do the work.
This fact that these experiments don't match the results we see on ancient artifacts was demonstrated in my presentation on the Egyptian tube drills several times, like in this bit here where the Penn University tried it in several different ways and their results didn't match. Mark Lehner tried it and his results didn't match, although he declared victory anyway.
Wow! You popped right out of there!
Oh!
Look at
that!
Woo!
Yes!
That could be Fourth Dynasty, Dennis.
That's right.
And even Chris Dunn tried it in his book, and his results didn't match.
But Dennis Stocks did get a match. Stocks, acknowledges that Core 7 has tapered grooves resembling a spiral, but parallel grooves as well. He was able to figure out what the Penn University team did wrong in their experiment. Noting how the Egyptians depicted themselves using bows to turn their drills, Stocks wrote, "Although Gorlick and Gwinnett mention the use of a bow drill, they do not indicate if any of their drill holes were made with a bow-driven tube. Therefore, all the holes produced in Gorlick and Gwinnett's experiments were parallel, not tapered." A bow drill, you see, makes the drill go back and forth, so it makes different marks than if it were going one way. He continues, "As a core and a hole wall are worn away by the gyration of the drill tube, some existing striations are abraded away, but these are deepened again by new sand crystals. These striations generally run horizontally around a core and the hole's wall, but some striations cross existing ones at various angles. The spiral striations seen by Petrie on the granite core from Giza can be explained in this way.